Welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host Kayuda, and I've said this before, that in a world of disorientation, we need processes of reorientation to get us back on track. You might well be familiar that some of the most reliable pathways of reorientation and recalibration that I've returned to and have been deeply involved in over the past decade has been the visionary medicine, sacred shamanic medicine, plant medicine path, and my guest for this episode has been a full-time active member and a leading voice in Australia's sacred plant medicine community with nearly 3 decades of experience growing and working with Huachuma, perhaps better known as the San Pedro Cactus. Originally from Takaka in New Zealand, my guest, Bay Tretiakov, teaches others to grow, prepare, and safely engage with this powerful master plant. And together with his wife, Lydia, he facilitates ceremonies, offers microdosing support, and shares a vision for accessible, ethical, and community-rooted healing. He's also the creator of attunement therapy, which is an international modality that integrates energetic and somatic intelligence for transformational well-being. Bay shares a lot in this podcast episode, and we cover some fertile ground from the relationship between human and plant consciousness, the ins and outs of San Pedro Cactus as a healer, a teacher, a profound catalyst for change and awakening, the dynamics of ceremony design and the role of music in ceremony, including within the natural catharsis cycles of the body, how different geographical environments affect the characteristics of San Pedro, and so much more. We dive deep from the get-go, so settle in for this full power flow episode from our guest, Bay Tretiakov. So, Bay, I thought about this quote this morning by Joseph Campbell. The psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight. And in the context of where we're going to start this convo, I also thought about this in regards to, let's say, the ordinary person or the uninitiated person or the unawakened person. Where are they in relation to the water? Are they standing on the shore, perhaps with wet feet, but rest of the body still dry? And it's kind of a rhetorical question that I'm bringing up here. And whatever the case, I'm bringing it up as we're going to dive straight into the deep end here with this opening question in regards to human consciousness and plant consciousness. So I want to ask you, from a mystic's point of view, how might you begin to describe the relationship between human consciousness and master plant consciousness or sacred teacher plant consciousness?
Nice. Yeah, bro. Awesome. I mean, the question about the water there, it's interesting because a lot of people, or the regular person, would probably be trying to pretend the water's not there. Their foot's not dipped in it. They're trying to pretend it's not there.
Yeah, it's a good point.
They know it's there and they're in cognitive dissonance about it. They're trying to forget that it's there. And so, our education system is basically reductionist and mechanistic. So the idea, or Alan Watts's definition of the mystic, is someone who is sensuously aware of their non-separation of all the universe all the time. So that means you're aware that you're connected to everything, every when. So through time, all the time. So that's, and then the mystic can kind of sit back and chill in that awareness. And someone who says is psychotic or something like that, it's a different definition of maybe someone who's having these experiences or hearing voices or something like that. And we think, oh, this person's crazy, that they're saying they can see things or this or that, and so there's a different definition there. And so, yeah, so that's the thing, is a lot of people firmly believe, because of their education system, that they are separate from everything. And so the older you get, especially if you're highly educated, so if you look at someone like a physicist or a medical doctor, that the education starts to become, they start to identify their sense of self with their education. And so if they, like that ocean there, that kind of ocean of mysticism or ocean of possibilities, they want to pretend it's not there, but because it's too hard to have your belief system crushed, because your belief system is something you identified as the self. And this is where you get people who are fiercely kind of skeptic and things like that, or this kind of whole vibe of people who are into the debunking things and stuff like that, where they fiercely want to be right and want to solve problems. And so that, there's an idea of masculinity, like man's going to conquer space. Space is the final frontier. There was, magazines around the planet in the 1930s, we're going to conquer space. Like, space is a mystery and we're going to work it out. Then that mystery is, we're going to tick it off,
Totally.
And yeah, and so there's this idea that there's people are they see a mystery and they want to solve it and finish it off.
Mm.
And so it's like really reducing all of these things in the universe and reality so we understand them all. And so the concept of a mystery, which essentially mysticism is a mystery,
Mm.
what's really beautiful to look at people who have a relationship with the mystery and they're not trying to solve it. And in our modern day and age, this is a very feminine way of being, where it's like, oh, this is mysterious. I'm just going to love it. And so, yeah, man, like you can look at a lot of worship and different religions and things like that. There's a whole mystery element to it. You know, so if you look at, say, people building a cathedral, I mean, a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about Christianity, but people building a cathedral and painting the inside of the roof and domes and things like this and all the stonework and all the mathematics, these people are highly motivated by their love for the relationship with the mystery, which is their communion and prayer to their God. Yeah,
Mm.
and so it's an amazing thing to look at it like that. And so, what was the last part of the question there?
Well, when you were talking, I was thinking about this idea of conquering, like you're talking about going into space and conquering that. And I often talk about it because we spend a lot of time up in the mountains during when I'm working with the medicines. And I talk about this idea that people speak about, which is conquering a mountain. I scaled that mountain and I conquered it. And I'm like, it's such a funny idea, really, to think that we as humans could conquer something as Earth as a, I'll put it in this way, like as a larger individual node within an even greater cosmic constellation, its own kind of much more larger sentient being than we are. Anyways, that's just speaking to this idea of conquering, but to reiterate what I was speaking about in terms of human consciousness and plant consciousness, this idea of Earth as this individual node within a larger, this cosmic constellation, to use the words from before, and as this living node with its own consciousness, say, you could say that it seeks harmony and homeostasis, just as our bodies as human beings seek the same thing. When we're out of balance, our bodies undergo a detoxification or a composting or a purification process. And if we understand some of these greater spiritual laws, such as the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without, then it's reasonable to say that Earth initiates similar processes. And with the current state of the world, one could say that there's a symbiotic or a synergistic relationship regarding the secretion of these teacher plants, these sacred medicine plants, by our earth, and then we as humans and our increasing awareness of them and our curiosity to ingest them. So I guess I'm pointing back to this kind of same question or reflection point of how would you describe the relationship between human consciousness and then plant consciousness?
Yeah. Okay, here, bro.
Yeah.
All right. So, you look at the planetary and human relationship is quite interesting right now. And one of the far out parts about this design is we have free will, and so you can be creative or destructive. And at the moment, we need original problem solving to solve problems because as we see, if you try and solve a problem the same way over and over again, you're not going to it's not going to get solved. And
Yeah.
if you look at Michael Pollan's book talking about psychedelics, how to change your mind, he talks about the idea of psychedelic plants basically injecting entropy. So entropy is like a new ways of thinking in the brain, where the brain is doing things that are basically irregular into the population. And so if we're talking about, say, San Pedro or other plant medicines, we can. What I'm talking about is something that's very, very, very intelligent. It's not random. It's not like just a random plant. It's nothing's put by chance. And
Mm.
so, talking about design, so a lot of First Nations people in the United States, they talk about this idea that the plants had different instructions, and so they've been given different instructions. And if
Mm.
you get into, like, say, Dr. Michael Newton's work with life in between lives, soul journey, and things like that. A lot of people who are interviewed in a hypnotic state in between lives, people are actually talking about designing life forms, designing plants, and things like this. That's really, really abstract and far out for someone who's a mechanistic. If you're a mechanistic
Mm.
scientist, because a lot of people are into this idea of a random selection, so everything's random. And if you have deep experiences with plant medicine, then you realize that the idea of random selection, everything being random, doesn't work. Doesn't work. It's like the power of, say, San Pedro. with the way it interfaces with humans is so complex. There can't be anything random about it. And it's a mystery, and it's a beautiful thing. And so, because we have free will, it means we can, as a population, if we all believe in the same thing, so we all have the same beliefs around how energy should be produced, or something like that, or how food should be produced, or how we should interact with other countries, or how we should treat the ocean, because we have free will. And so, like a good example is like if you live in a family and you all have the same belief system, it's easier to go along with your family belief system to have the same ideas. But again, it's free will. And so with problem solving as well, as we become older and older, we're going to look at a problem based on our previous experiences, but based on also the people around us as well. So I use this example of like someone broken down on the side of the road, and they're driving a Tesla car, and you go help them out. You open the hood. Your previous experiences are looking for problems inside a petrol engine. And so you're looking for the carburetor, you're looking for these different things, and they're not there. And you're like, well, based on my previous experiences, I don't know what to do. Whereas if you get like, say, a 10-year-old, and they look under the hood of that car, they don't have probably most 10-year-olds don't have previous experiences of trying to fix a petrol car. And so they might actually be able to solve the problem quicker than you, because your problem solving skills are polluted by your previous experiences. So when it comes to plant medicine, things like magic mushrooms, San Pedro, and even LSD, they create an entropy in the brain. So we're actually able to solve problems with the same way that a young person would. And so one of the roles, like as far as like talking about this relationship on the planet between master plants and humans, is to create completely original styles of and processes of problem solving within a population. Because as a population stagnates, you could look at something like, the collapse of the Roman Empire. There's a lot of stagnation in policy and in politics and military doctrine that created the stagnation that led to the collapse of the empire. And so if you look at something like that with the population, where all that sort of destruction can happen, when you have, so like right now, there's like a lot of, in this country and other countries, there's a lot of politicians, they still have a lot of strong, you could even say Puritan Christian ideals in the way they want to dictate policy. And that means controlling people's access to mysticism. Because if you want access to mysticism, you can go hear about it in a religious institution. But someone's personal access to mysticism can be found through all these different beautiful things. It could be fasting, could be breath work, it could be through dance, it could be through master plants. And so, they even don't really support people doing darkness retreats. It's not something that the government likes, because the amount of information, access to mysticism that people can get by sitting in the dark for say 4 days or something like that. And so it's a real interesting one. And the role of these plants is to basically save society when we get into these kind of bottlenecks of problem solving. And because we have free will, we can all go into these places of basically destroying each other and not thinking outside that box. And we all have this inborn drive to alter consciousness. Look at teenagers who want to get drunk and smoke weed and, like pop some Adderall or something like that. There's a desire to change consciousness, and it's inbuilt. It's genetically there, so that we eat these plants to create, alternative thinkers in society. And one of the really interesting kind of questions about this is you have people like Aldous Huxley, who had some of the earliest well-recorded masculine experiences. And after having these experiences, this is what I've heard, is he said that these experiences aren't for everyone. It's just for like, he had an elitist view to altered states of consciousness, apparently, where he's like, this is just for certain types of people. And on the other end of that spectrum, you have Timothy Leary with the release of LSD, saying everyone should have LSD. And that's how we're going to change things. And so he was like, we've got to get LSD out to everyone. And they actually changed consciousness and changed society and created counterculture and created a huge amount of critical thinking, which basically stopped the Vietnam War early. And a lot of people just didn't want to go fight. And they really changed the consciousness around peace and love and, war, and especially around the whole culture of conscription in Western culture, where like a lot of young men are like, I'm going to go to Canada or go to jail as opposed to go kill people in Vietnam. I don't know, and I don't understand why the war's happening, and the government can't really explain to me why the war's happening. And so it created a counterculture.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's such a push and pull in our culture around these plant medicines because, you know, military, like Australia right now, they need a bigger military. They're like, well, we're in a situation we need a bigger military. But in Australia, people don't want to join the military. They want to go surfing, you know. They want to like, and if we get into a conflict with China and you're in the military, you'll probably die. People don't want to do that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people want to, you know, have a cruisy lifestyle.
Mm.
And so, if you're really into engineering a population as a government, there's a huge argument to keep all these things illegal. It's a massive argument. If as a consultant working for the government who understands, say, like the counterculture revolution, the Vietnam War, they'll be like, yeah, like they're saying LSD is public enemy number one. It's that they want to stop people having their own access to mysticism, but also these plants create like a critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
original critical thinking. And any government wants to be lazy. They want to spend the least amount of energy managing a country.
Mm-hmm.
And so the easiest way to do that, as far as managing energy, is to police these things. But the relationship between humans and the planet needs these plants in circulation so that we can have this entropy injected into the population of problem solvers and that kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, man. So it's these plants have a real specific mission. And what's beautiful about San Pedro in particular is it takes time to grow. And so if you talk to an elder in Peru or in the Andes, they would say, San Pedro doesn't see time as linear. It knows about the problems that humans are going to have at a particular place in 100 years. It knows that's going to happen, and it knows that it could help with that. And so people ingest this plant, and the plant will say things to them like, "Oh, go plant me in New Zealand, go plant me in Australia, go plant me in California." But it will do this before it's needed there chronologically, so it can grow.
Mm.
And that's an epic mystery,
Mm.
that the intelligence of these plants to see through time, because linear time is more of a language construct. I'll see you at the pub tomorrow. Oh, how was the surf yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
It's a way we can communicate and make sense of things with what the sun's doing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of a language construct and not really how things operate in physics.
If you're in the southern hemisphere, winter is coming. And no, this isn't an outdated Game of Thrones reference, but with the change in seasons and the cold and flu symptoms that can come with that, it can be imperative to look for ways to support our immune function, improve energy and vitality and hormonal health, and to ensure that we're cultivating a healthy stress response. And one of the ways that I've been doing this for about a decade now is with some of my favorite tonic herbs and adaptogenic medicinal mushrooms from the folks over at Superfeast. Personally, I love the Mason's Mushrooms Blend, which contains a powerhouse of medicinal mushrooms like reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, and all of these mushrooms have been used for centuries in traditional Chinese medicine for immunity support, longevity, vitality, digestive health, cognitive function, and I love combining that with Jing, which I find helps with stress, resilience, emotional balance, overall well-being. And I usually mix these two up with some hot water, coconut milk, a touch of honey, maybe a pinch of cayenne or some cacao. Give it a zhuzh in the blender. It's not only delicious, but my body absolutely loves it. And I keep returning to Superfeast because they emphasize their unwavering commitment to quality and sustainability, and they source their herbs from their native regions. They prioritize organic and wild-crafted ingredients, and they're absolutely adamant that their products are free from additives, fillers, and artificial ingredients. So if you're ready to level up your adaptogenic mushroom and tonic herb lifestyle, go check out superfeast.com.au or use the link in the show notes. They've got a solid range of products over there. You can use the code Cayuta10 at checkout for 10% off every single order. And anytime you use it, it helps support the show, which is great. That's Cayuta10, all in capital letters at checkout. Solid riff. Yeah, as you're speaking, it's got me thinking about intentions and as how humans, we have individual agendas or intentions that have their place in collective agendas or intentions. Some light, some dark. And then it sounds like you've answered my question to some degree, but I'll throw it back to you anyway to see if there's anywhere else you want to take this. You're talking about plants having their own unique intelligent design. It sounds like you're speaking into how plants do indeed have their own agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole element of like, I guess, cooperation going on,
Mm.
on the planet. And so and balance. And there is a culture on the planet that is very natural, which is about giving unconditionally, you know? There's a book called The Prophet, and it says, "Give as in yonder valley the lemon myrtle breathes its fragrance into space." So the lemon myrtle is just doing it,
Mhm.
and there's no agenda. Yeah, it's just giving as its natural way of being. And speaking of being and something like bees, beekeeping is a very cosmic way of exploring this because, say, if you build a relationship with bees and you keep bees, they start to notice you as a human. And this isn't random, it's not like chance. So when you take care of bees, you may be planting flowers or keeping an eye on the hive, stopping pests, expanding a hive as they need it to be expanded, reducing a hive as they need it to be smaller. The bees start to produce excess honey. And this isn't, it's not like, um, it's not random. They produce excess honey for you.
Mm.
And then if you don't take the honey out, there's too much honey for them to protect during winter, and then it can lead to predation. So they need you to take the extra honey out that they've made for you as well. And so I believe that nature is filled with these relationships. Whereas you get someone who's kind of a bit of you know, a debunker or an anarchist would be like, beekeeping isn't natural, you know? And so
Mhm.
that, there's people like, well, it's not natural for humans to take care of bees. Bees should just exist without humans. And it's I don't agree with that.
It's
There's
a
something
funny
like,
conversation to have. It's a pretty common one against that demographic where we're talking about humans as being separate from nature. It's that same kind of Cartesian
like
split
humans
between
are a
self and
disease that
other,
has
humans
arrived on
and
the planet.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
humans are this virus that kind of Mr. Anderson kind of speech from the Matrix, like humans are a virus,
Mm.
this kind of thing. And so you have this kind of um that sort of rhetoric is where, people start to, join death cults and stuff like that. It's pretty full on. And so this idea of this symbiosis of all species is really beautiful to look at,
Mm.
what's happening on the planet.
Mm.
And yeah, like, yeah, a place like New Zealand's really interesting because humans have really done a lot of damage by introducing all these species that shouldn't be there. So there's no native mammals in New Zealand except two bats and like seals. So it's a land of birds.
Mm.
And people have introduced, rats and weasels and stoats and ferrets and deer and dogs and pigs and like all of these mammals that shouldn't be there. And they've like Australian possums have like blitzed the environment. And and it's like full on. But then at the same time, in New Zealand, there's this amazing kahu, which is a hawk, which has now got all this amazing things to eat, and there's
Mm.
like hawks flying around everywhere eating all this roadkill. Like this is great. And so there's so much weird stuff going around with balance and imbalance, on the planet, and as kind of stewards of so many different environments on the planet as people, it's like we can choose whether to be creative or be destructive. It's a choice, and there's no right or wrong.
Mhm.
And one of my friends, he's a bit of an old mystic, and he said like, you know, all I really want to do is when I die is to know that I left the planet a little bit more beautiful than when I arrived.
Mm.
And that's his like axiom for life, and I like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, we've landed ourselves on the continent of New Zealand, so it's as good a place as any to start to distill the conversation down, brother. So, when I was listening to some previous podcasts, you have spoken to your relationship with the cactus, San Pedro, Huachuma, beginning very early on in life, from having the plants growing in your garden from a young age, and then first ingesting the cactus at, I think you said around 15 years old or something like this. You can speak to that in a moment. But I haven't heard you speak to what actually transpired for you during those early experiences. So there's some questions here regarding, does your family have a history of working with master plants? I guess that's the first question. And leading on from them, how did you come to first ingest these plants? And then what were those early experiences actually like for you?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so I started growing at age 10. So I just put a cactus garden in. You know, I was like chubby little kid who's kind of average at school. I got a little funny photo of me standing in front of my first cactuses, you know, and they came from a family member. And then when I was 15, I was actually at a festival, and that same family member gave me a brew to have at a festival,
Mm.
and it was very, very strong. So my first experience was, you know, if I look at it now, it was extremely visual and very strong. I'd had as much as
Straight in the deep end.
yeah. I found out that recently that the place that I had that dose, that Dalai Lama came through there in the 90s to this place in the Southern Alps. And he said it's the spiritual center of the universe. So, you know, this whole idea of scene and setting, you know, you want to have the medicine or whatever in the right place.
Mm.
So my first journey was in the spiritual center of the universe. So it was like a scene and setting fluke.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, these early experiences, that was, I mean, I guess with San Pedro's early experiences, I just felt amazing. And the exploration element as well with movement and being out in nature and connecting to the elements was just fantastic. Um, and through that time for me being I really loved high school. I had amazing teachers, and well, that time I was, you know, doing really well with school, and psychedelics completely added a really interesting quantity of critical thinking to me, where I stopped taking school so seriously.
Mm.
I was pretty serious about doing really well, and I stopped being so serious about it and started just really enjoying it. And I also started to see kind of the architecture of some of the pressure and fear they were instilling us in the high school system of like, you've got to get a degree or you're working your gas station. You've got to go get a student loan. You've got to do this or your life's going to be really hard. So like,
Mm.
get in debt. It doesn't matter what degree you get, just get a degree. And it's like, it started to kind of not make sense in the sense because we've got these teenagers who are barely just discovering themselves and what they're interested in life, and they're told to go get a degree and get this huge loan, even if it's something they're not interested in. And at the time, I was working with a barista in a cafe, and he had 2 degrees, and he was making coffee, and he just wasn't really interested in the things he had studied. And I could see that there was actually a lot of you know, I guess manipulation of young people, which I found to be quite sociopathic. And so I decided to not go to university. Um, yeah, I'll probably be an engineer or something like that if I
Mm.
hadn't discovered psychedelics, and I'd probably be working in an office, and I'd probably be depressed, and I'd probably be on antidepressants,
Mm.
you know? And so, it's really opened up something completely different for me. So, you know, I've worked with, you know, mushrooms and San Pedro since I was 15 and have been quite liberally since then. Yeah.
Mm. Speaking to Huachuma, was there a moment in those earlier years where you felt like Huachuma had claimed you in a way that you couldn't walk away from?
Not in earlier years.
That came later on.
What you know, kind of. I mean, it's it's such a benevolent plant, this idea of actually claiming someone is, I don't know if I really agree with that. It's like the idea that it's, um, earlier on, I found that my interest in these plants was quite unique,
Mm.
especially my interest in having larger doses and, you know, especially going out to nature and things like that, was not regular. Um, and what I've found in more recent years is that because I've, you know, served thousands of people, San Pedro, I do have quite a large base of information to work with
Mm.
how it helps different types of people because, you know, I work with so many different types of people,
Mm.
and it's gotten to a point now where I'm very comfortable with the transmission of this plant and what it does, but also the mysteries around it and all the still the unknowns. You can study this plant your whole life and really just scratch the surface, to be honest.
Mm.
Um, and it's more, and I now see myself as as a herald for the plant, as like someone who can share its message, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does make
Yeah.
sense. And that's a nicer way of putting it rather than, or when I'm using that word claimed by a plant, because it doesn't feel like that's the right kind of energy.
Well, the plants are very San Pedro and peyote in particular have a very strong frequency of nonviolence,
Yeah.
and helping people learn about these relationships in their life where what you are saying, doing, thinking, the things you project at people, where that is, you know, violent and non-violent, and how to, you know, San Pedro is like working with a coach, which can, you know, keep reminding you of things like this with the way you're interacting with yourself and with other people and with the universe. And so the non-violence and the free will and choice frequency is so strong with these plants. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's get into the weeds a bit more when it comes to talking about San Pedro and Huachuma. But first, I want to touch on this theme of your voice, because not only are you you're not only well experienced in the master teacher plant world, and you're also a full-time working member of this community here in Australia, but listening to you speak across a variety of platforms. So the podcasts, and I watched some of your old workshops on YouTube. Like you did a few Mullen workshops from like many years ago now. And what I became aware of is that you really have a broad scope of knowledge which you draw from. And you're very articulate across many different subject matters too, which is quite inspirational and also aspirational. So I'm curious about your relationship between the master teacher plants, particularly Huachuma, but all of them, the other plant medicines that you have and still do work with, and the cultivation of your voice, your ability to speak clearly, to speak your truth, being able to recall information and knowledge, not just broadly, but also very deeply as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's a complicated question. So I did a podcast recently and in New Zealand, and I just listened to it the other day. I hadn't listened to it yet. And I didn't most of the way through the podcast, I'm like going, well, that's a cool idea. That's a good point. But I don't recall saying any of those things.
Hmm.
And so when you ask me a question and then I speak, I'm in an altered state. I'm not thinking.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so with San Pedro, well, I'll come back. So with DMT, they talk about this thing called the white hole. It's almost like too much information. So if you smoke DMT and there's too much or something like that, or you have a lot of ayahuasca, it's almost like that. They talk about the white hole. There's too much information coming in. And so much information, you come out of the session, you're like, well, I don't know what to do with all that. Whereas a huge amount of data can come in with San Pedro any strength of journey, but it goes into the soma, it goes into the body consciousness. Now, let's just say I have a strong journey and I'm like, well, I learned all these things, but they're not floating in front of your face as data that you don't know how to integrate and what folder to put that in or anything like that. It's like, well, what do I do with all this? It's not like that. It goes into the soma. And that means that if you ask me a question, I might have a well-rounded answer that I learnt from a journey 10 years ago. And as it becomes relevant, that information is not sitting around in my head. As it becomes relevant, it spontaneously rises out of the soma, out of my body,
Mm.
and I speak. And that's why I don't remember a lot of what we'll talk about in this chat, because it's just coming out of me like that.
Mm.
And so what I find with San Pedro is and you could say this about other psychedelics, but they actually allow the brain to fire and wire and join in different ways. And so these different processes can happen, even though I'm saying it's coming out of the body. Like I heard a report of a 10-year-old kid. His mother's giving him his school wants to give him Ritalin because he can't do maths. He doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't want to go to school because he can't do maths. Like he's like upset with himself because he can't do it. His mother starts microdosing on San Pedro, and he says, I can feel the information coming out of the back of my head into the front. And this is on a few mils. It's a very small amount into the front. And then it all just makes sense. And then I can just do it. And so, a lot of us don't have ideal childhoods, and we're under stress in different ways where the brain isn't able to develop to its perfect potential. And, perfect parenting doesn't exist. And so a lot of us have cognition issues because of, stress when we're in utero and this kind of childbirth stress, this kind of stuff, or all kinds of things. So a lot of us, our brains don't operate in the most optimal way. Whereas what I find with San Pedro is it can start to repair cognition. And what's really curious about that is, say something like my friend is a professional guitarist. He's very, very good. That's his profession.
Mm-hmm.
He did San Pedro ceremonies for about 3 years, and he reckons that he doubled his skills as his life skills as a guitarist. He doubled them in those 3 years, and he's only doing ceremonies once a month or something like that. Or you have someone who's microdosing, and they're feeling really connected. They're feeling really confident with conversations. They're feeling confident in the workplace. They're feeling really confident with focus. And then a few days later, they're having a similar experience, and they think they've microdosed, and then they remember that they haven't. It was the other day. And so these types of connections that can happen with San Pedro in the mind continue running after it's happened, not because it's still there, but it's actually retraining the brain to operate in different ways and maybe, you know, healing cognition in the brain, which is super powerful. A really simple way of experiencing this is if you're into, say, rattles or percussion, and you're drumming or you're rattling, and you had some San Pedro, and you're able to discover spontaneously, and there's a Zen element here. There's a sudden spontaneous arrival at being able to do a new rhythm. And you're like, fuck, I've been trying to do that rhythm for years, and now I'm doing it. And you're like, oh, it's because of the San Pedro. So when that's gone, I'm not going to be able to do it. But then you try the next day, and you've got it. It's in there. And so your ability to learn anything and to shift into different perceptions or ways of being and coming back to nonviolence and just even the way we communicate and things like that in a non-invasive way, these sorts of habits can become hardwired. And so speech is one, and the way we talk, that kind of thing. Yeah, man.
I resonate with a lot of that. Look, after working with Huachuma in a deepening way over the past 10 plus years, I often talk about Huachuma being one of my soul teachers when it has come to being or cultivating my voice and not just being able to speak more clearly and speak my truth and stand in my truth, but I say that Huachuma taught me how to play guitar. Huachuma taught me how to sing. And in the context of this conversation, most people are going to have some kind of solid foundation or a reference point as to what we mean when we're talking about San Pedro or Huachuma. But I dare say there will be some people that don't have that reference point. So for those people, we're talking about the columnar cactus that is native to a lot of places in South America: Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, Argentina. This cactus has found its way all across the world. We're speaking about if we want to get into the taxonomy, the genus is Trichocereus, but there are many different species or various species that can be used for their, let's say, medicinal or spiritual qualities. Pachanoi, Brigesii, Peruvianus, Scopulocola, so on and so forth. It's been used or approached as a teacher plant, a medicine plant for many thousands of years. And that's the thing. There's many ways to articulate Huachuma, San Pedro, as a dynamic being, as a dynamic plant, a teacher, a healer, a revealer, an activator, an amplifier, a pattern disruptor. So tell us about, or how would you begin to describe Huachuma? You've already begun, but how would you continue to describe Huachuma in the context of this conversation for people that don't quite have that same solid foundation or reference point as others might have?
Yeah, well, I have the privilege of running many events, and I have the privilege of serving a lot of people this sacrament for the first time in their lives. And it's beautiful. This time we have a lot of really brave people, especially, you know, people in their 70s, some people in their 80s, some young people like 20-year-olds and stuff coming to these ceremonies. And I could sit and describe it and talk about it for hours, but it's I don't. We get on with it. But one of the ways I like to describe it, it's like, you know, if you eat San Pedro or you drink San Pedro and you go for a walk, you sit there and you start to notice things. You start to notice things. Like a good example is you might have a microdose and like, oh, I'm not feeling it. It's not working. Nothing's happening. And you're walking, and in the distance you see like a really cool flower. Let's say it's like a violet iris or something growing out the side of a swamp, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And you walk like 100 meters and you're looking at this flower and you're like, that's cool. Like it's got like water droplets on it and there's a little spider web and so beautiful. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm still not feeling it. And then you realize you deviated off the path you're on to walk 100 meters to go look at a flower. And you're like, well, I'm not feeling it. But then you start to do things slightly irregularly, this kind of thing. Another example, this guy is 58, he's done a microdose. And he's like, oh, I'm not feeling it. Not feeling it. And he's microdosed all week. Oh, I'm not feeling it. And then he's realizing that he started picking up hitchhikers, but he never picks up hitchhikers. He never wants to. He's picking these people up and he's talking to them. He's having a nice conversation. He's like, oh, okay, that's far out. And so another example, someone's walking down the beach. They have a microdose. Oh, I'm not feeling it. But people keep coming up to them and talking to them. And they're like, what's going on here? Like people are actually, there's a It's like there's a radiant field where people are magnetized to me, this kind of thing. And so even on these small levels, San Pedro changes perception in a way that might just seem like something irregular, but it's not very strong. And there's such a huge spectrum of experiences from this sort of, again, these sort of microdoses to what you can experience on what I call a macrodose, which is the largest amount you can have without going up. And so it's really hard to articulate. But again, if we're talking about a master plant, one of the ways I define this is something that can clean your body, spirit, and mind, can teach you anything, and there's no limit to that, and can also empower you for prayer and manifestation. So one of the ways I describe this, so getting back to cleaning, I guess, I've mentioned this. Sometimes I just mention random things at the start of the ceremony, and then it might happen to someone. Whereas I heard this explained at ayahuasca ceremony before as well, where something that you've seen or something you've experienced can actually purge through your visual cortex, where you're actually, as the visions of the traumatic event or something like that are leaving the body, you see it, but it's almost like in fast forward. And so some people have seen a lot of toxic stuff. Some people have seen a lot of violence. Some people have seen a lot of crummy movies when they were teenagers. Some people have, there can be a lot of toxic advertising, media, television advertising, episodes of Friends, they were, and stuff like, or like even stuff like pornography and stuff like that. So where people, they're like, okay, I'm in the ceremony. I'm going to have the beatific vision. I'm going to open my eyes. I'm going to be sitting inside a lotus flower with Buddha. But they just see horror movies and porn, and they're like, well, what was that? And it's this, that's their mind is being cleaned, and it can be, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to you or someone, but it can happen. And so they can be giving flashbacks of having an abusive relationship with their parents or something like that. And so that the mind is being cleaned. And this is more common with people in their earliest ceremonies. And another way, so San Pedro can't really teach you much if your mind is full of this sort of stuff. And so the mind cleaning element is so beautiful, because more and more young people are seen that's involved with so much media on their phones, and a lot of it's sociopathic, which means that the companies which design these apps they're working out ways to hack your mind to make the app addictive, to get your attention, your biphotonic energy, into a false light matrix, inside a phone or something like that, to get your attention. So so they can give you all this advertising and things like that, and get you hooked. And it's a very sociopathic way to treat other humans. And so the people who own these companies like Instagram or Snapchat and things like that, is a huge sociopathic element of it's almost like selling drugs, basically. And so the information that's being directed to you, what I mean by sociopathic is they are comfortable with harming you, or they actually thrive on it, this kind of thing. And they know that they're harming you. And so this is where, even Australia has said, that we want to make social media illegal for under 18s. And it's a really, really, really big problem. And it's very hard to police. And the power of these companies is huge. And the sociopathic energy is so intense. And so a lot of people are purging this sort of stuff out of them in a ceremony through their mind. And the beautiful thing about San Pedro is that it's a very, I guess, modern medicine. It understands what we're dealing with. It doesn't matter who drinks it or has it. It's like they understand where you're at, what you're exposed to, and the sort of level of health that you need at this time. But the way San Pedro helps people with cleaning as well, it's not going to give you too much at once. It's gonna challenge you and help you to a level that you can cope with. And that's the beautiful element of the way that the intelligence of this plant works with your soma. So they interface, and it's like, okay, what can you handle right now? Because if you're feeling really strong in your constitution, and you're like, hey, yeah, I've got this massive issue with my childhood, and I really want to work on this, and you're feeling strong, it might take you there, and you can work on this and let this thing go. And maybe after that ceremony, you need to go have a conversation with your mum or your dad or your brother and apologize, or work something out. But if you actually don't have the strength or the ability, and you don't have the support network around you, the medicine might not take you into that issue. And so this is what I call a total holding environment. This is the people in the space where you're having the plant, but also the people who are around you in your home life and your personal life. Do you have that kind of that holding and that attunement emotionally with people around you? And so the plant's very aware of where you're at, and what you can handle. And so the cleaning can also happen with the body as well. So a lot of people have different toxicity in their body, and like energy trapped in their body.
Mhm.
So the body, we often have trapped energy in our autonomic nervous system from traumatic events. So some people shake and vibrate as well, getting this energy out of their autonomic nervous system, which is great. But there's this concept that a sick body is basically a body that's got too much mucus in it. It could be in the digestive tract, anywhere in your head,
Mhm.
um, all over the place. So some people actually will throw up mucus on San Pedro, getting this mucus out of the body.
Mhm.
And some people even get like a mucousy diarrhea. So the body's getting cleaned out. Sometimes people have just a shit diet, and the San Pedro is like, you need to change your diet. And you feel sick right now because of your diet. It's not me, it's you. And so these plants don't make people sick. People make themselves sick. And yeah, it's that sort of cleaning is really powerful. And what's very unique about that is often once the physical cleaning is done or the mind cleaning is done, if you don't expose yourself to more density distortions, toxicity, then it's done. And the plant will start working with you in a different way
Mhm.
and start more focusing on alignment, path, purpose, teaching, and where it's interfacing with your belief system, your
Mhm.
language, your skill set, and we around the planet, the family you've chosen to incarnate into, and everything that's going on around you to help you, live in your fullest potential for creativity, peace, and love,
Mhm.
and giving and helping people around you. And so I call this coherent innovation, and this can really apply to people in their workplace where people are having San Pedro and then they go to work and they're making their workplace more clean and green and sustainable. And so by
Mhm.
coherent, I mean, it's like bringing in life affirming values to your creativity and what's going on. And then finally, as this element, San Pedro as a master plant is this empowerment aspect.
Mhm.
And my kung fu teacher says, if you want to be powerful, don't try to be powerful. It's just something that arrives naturally as opposed to something that you are trying to attain.
Mhm.
And so I like to think of, say, someone in the Andes who's been working with San Pedro for many, many lineages. They personally, they're not looking for cleaning, and they personally are not looking for teaching. They're clear, and they know what they need to do.
Mhm.
And their ingestion of San Pedro could be to help others, or it could be the empowerment to pray and focus. And that means that one of the technical, scientific ways San Pedro helps us focus is it boosts the dopamine and oxygen in the prefrontal cortex, which allows us to focus in the same way that, say, maybe nicotine does or a psychostimulant does. Like, even like Ritalin, it boosts the prefrontal cortex, but also like things like coffee and things like that. But also human touch and closeness also boosts the prefrontal cortex. So we're able to focus. And so San Pedro boosts this ability so we can focus on one thing. So you're praying for peace in Palestine, Israel, this kind of thing. We're focusing on peace. We're visualizing that really strongly. We're praying for these people not to build this gold mine in New Zealand that's going to mess up the water table. We're praying and we're focused and we're speaking. And so this level of power and focus is on a quantum physical level is how we change reality.
Mhm.
And again, if you're a mechanistic reductionist, if you have that sort of belief system, then all of that is redundant. And so it's like when that famous guy, I think it's Richard Dawkins, he's a famous kind of skeptic,
Mhm.
and he was still in hospital. He didn't want anyone to pray for him because he doesn't believe in prayer. And people are like, well, sorry, bro, we're going to pray for you anyway. And so a lot of people don't believe in this type of thing. But in the Red Road and these types of ceremonies where like in a Native American church ceremony, you have a person who's a sponsor. They have a prayer like, "Hey, my my daughter is pregnant with twins, and there's been some complications, and we're gonna have a ceremony, and we're gonna focus and pray for her to have a safe childbirth. And the whole community is gonna get together. We're gonna eat medicine, and we're gonna focus with the fire. We're gonna speak. We're gonna pray with tobacco. We're gonna pray. We're all gonna visualize. We're all gonna focus on that same thing. And the first part of the ceremony, we're getting our dead steeds, we're getting our distractions out of the way. If there's anything that's happened with us with childbirth or anything like that, maybe there's people there with a traumatic birth, but we're clearing that. We're clearing that out of the that trauma out of the body. We're going to focus on that for her, yeah, and for her children, and 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 then there's a safe birth. And so, in that sense, that those people know that if they need to fix something or heal something, we're going to pray for it in that way in a ceremony like that.
Mhm.
And that's not something that only only First Nations people in the United States have access to. We all have access to prayer and focus. And San Pedro is a beautiful plant for allowing people to come together and like, oh, we're also going to focus on this as a part of a ceremony together, or something that someone can do on their own as well. And again, the power element's really interesting, because if you went high altitude in the Alps and you say on your own, and you had a big dose and you needed the power and focus to get over a certain mountain peak as well, and then maybe it's getting dark and you're like, oh, I've got to do this descent, but I'm getting a sore knee. You could have a bit more because it's an anti-inflammatory, and that knee's going to be good. And you're going to have the motor skills and the extra energy to get down a ravine or something like that. And so that the power and focus to achieve these sorts of challenges can be really, really powerful with adverse weather and different situations, or you could be in the dark for 24 hours, this sort of thing. Like there's this other element. So if you did say, there's a rites of passage where, people get buried up to their neck in soil to be connected to the earth, having San Pedro will give you more power to focus and give you the spiritual stamina to achieve these sorts of rites of passage, or kind of warriors kind of journey, archetypal possibilities.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Spiritual stamina, I call that the spiritual firepower. And as you're talking, it's just so interesting to look at a lot of these dynamic approaches and how Huachuma can be such a dynamic healer and teacher and medicine across many different contexts. And I'm thinking about perhaps some of the more historical or the archaic approaches, and what those actually are. Well, I'm not entirely sure, but what I'm thinking of is spiritual insight, divination, initiation, magical practices, diagnosis of illness. Again, the larger prayer of connection and cohesion and coherence amongst peoples in the earth. And then, of course, we're talking about the archaic approaches of actually ingesting the cactus itself in its raw form, to all the way up to these modern day approaches, which you could say are more refined, perhaps, or even these reductionist methods, all the way from the extraction of one alkaloid from the plant, which we're talking about mescaline here. But of course, a lot of people in these day and ages you're speaking to, they're approaching this particular plant, and many of these plant medicines and plant teachers wanting to heal from psychological ailments, emotional burdens, physiological issues, spiritual disconnection. So there's many ways that Huachuma can heal us. Huachuma can heal us in this regard. But I love what you're speaking to in terms of the clearing and the cleansing, and the way that I usually put language to that. I think you used, what did you say? Cohesive innovation or coherent?
Coherent innovation.
Coherent innovation. Yeah. What you were speaking to around that conversation, the way that I typically language it is, when we do get clear and clean, when we're working with the master plants, it's not necessarily about all of this healing work anymore. It's a deeper alignment, a deeper coherence when it comes to mission, vision, purpose, soul gifts, the greater destiny calling us forth, our potential, our greater prayer for ourselves and our loved ones and our people and the planet. And then there's also this relationship between Huachuma and teacher plants, and the way in which they can catalyze a greater sense of ecological or environmental stewardship. And as a side note to that, I always think that it's kind of funny that we use the words ecological or environmental rather than eco-spiritual or enviro-spiritual or whatever it is, even those words and the way that Western culture tends to approach those particular ideas could be seen as coming more so from the mind rather than from heart, soul, and spirit. And what one of my teachers, the late great ascended maestro Don Howard Lawler, would often say, there's more than what's in the cup. There's more than what's in the cup. It's not necessarily just about the medicine itself, but it can be how the entire ceremonial context, including the land itself, and you spoke to the community of people that you have around you, also teaches and also imparts certain qualities and characteristics and teachings and medicine during the ceremony beyond just the cactus. And it feels like it's kind of leading into some of how you work with the cactus in a ceremonial context, because you've been initiated into the Red Road traditions and you also practice the peyote ways. So then how has that influenced the way that you work with Huachuma? Maybe that's the question that's coming out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the ceremony, we talk about a ceremony design. It's like a design means like how the ceremony kind of works from start to finish. And so the first aspect here is you've got like metabolism. So how long the medicine's going to affect people is kind of like how long the ceremony is, and the timeline of what happens in the ceremony is also, that's important. And the ceremony design I do is very dynamic, and it depends on the type of people I'm working with. So for example, we just did some ceremonies in New Zealand with people who've had less access to ceremonies, and they've also had less access to really structured ceremonies as well. And so for someone who's, a lot of people also have religious trauma, so there's something that's ceremonial or something like that can be a bit like, whoa, off-putting, because there's so many things maybe in it they don't understand. And so the ceremony for most Westerners, the ceremony can't be too ceremonial. Otherwise, it's too off-putting, and there's too much polarity. It's like, I don't understand all these things that are going on. Some people it feels like they feel I'm a bit alienated. Like say, I went to a ceremony where it's all the people attending speak English, and the whole ceremony is run in Spanish. And so that can be a bit alienating because people just don't know what's happening. Yeah, and that's just a little example. And so when we have people come to a lot of ceremonies, we start to add layers of etiquette and add layers of ceremony to it. And so there's certain things from the Red Road tradition which are really beautiful to add into a ceremony. And so one aspect that, here's an example. So in the morning at dawn, for a lot of ceremonies, we have a group gratitude prayer. And this is where there's a fire. If we're in a house, we just open up the fireplace. We're in a teepee with a fire in the middle, and everyone gets a chance. And they pick some cedar and they hold the cedar. And so cedar is this beautiful, pure spirit. And so Western red cedar, which is from British Columbia, Washington, North California, this kind of place. We working with the cedar and holding it. So if you look at the Lao Gung point on the hand in Chinese, there's actually like there's energy leaving the hand here. And so the energy leaving the hand here comes from your heart, and it can recrystallize and program the cedar with an intention. And so speaking from your heart, so in Chinese, intention means heart song, heart frequency. So if you're going to write the word intention, you write the word heart and soul, and you turn them into the same pictogram in Chinese. So your heart song is coming out through your hand, and it's recrystallizing the cedar with your prayer. And so we get these big, like, stoic blokes, who've never been to a ceremony, and you're going to speak in front of everyone about things in your life you're grateful for. And this is really powerful because they're going to talk, they could be talking about their wife and their dog and how awesome their parents were, and their colleagues or their children, and really feeling it. And it's like, and the idea of speaking to the fire is you're speaking to the universe. You're talking to like great spirit, and this idea that who we are, we came from spirit. So we're talking, if you look at someone like Dr. Bruce Lipton, the cell biologist, he's talking about like we aren't in our body. We're a signal which is making our body work together. There's a signal that's making all of our cells work together. He's like, we're like a signal. And the body's like a Mars rover. And so there's a signal that's come from source, and it's like making this little Mars rover, it's a human body, cruise around the planet. But we can send a message back to source being like, hey, like being in a human body is awesome. And so the idea with this gratitude prayer is like to send a message back to source, where we came from, being like, oh, I'm so glad I incarnated. Like I get to eat all this amazing food and surf. And so having people speak and be heard and be acknowledged and so that augments that prayer. And we do that in the morning because that's a really clear frequency that people are in then. They've done all kind of the work of the night. And so you can look at Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's book, Science and Spiritual Practices. And there's these really interesting studies in there about people who have a gratitude practice. It could be anything. They're healthier. And again, it's like getting to this concept that having a relationship to the mystery, like how a prayer practice is healthy. And then there's also studies that people with any type of prayer practice are also more healthy as well. And so that's an element of the ceremony. It's like a little bit kind of from the Red Road that we've brought in. And so I've had I've been really lucky to attend many different types of ceremonies. Living around the Byron Bay area for 20 years, in Australia, a lot of different, just the energy of the place, a lot of different, teachers, plant medicine facilitators have been traveling through this this area for a long time, and so I've had the ability to go to lots of different ceremonies, and because of my deep passion around San Pedro, I've designed a ceremony that's brought in elements of different ceremonies, and
Very syncretic.
we apply those where it's appropriate for the types of people. So the ceremony design I work with is very dynamic, and it's
Context dependent by the sounds of it.
designed for the people. Yeah. Like we went to a ceremony in Wirikuta in the desert with the Wararaka people last year. They were eating fresh peyote, and in their ceremony, maybe 3 hours in, a young man comes around and he gives everyone a stick. And it gives everyone a stick, and then the facilitator explains that we're all going to get up and we're all going to speak. He called it a confession. Things that we want to get off our chest, things we want to let go of. Oh, like, I'm sorry I did this, I'm sorry I did that, and you're speaking to the fire, and you're taking ownership and accountability, and you're apologizing, and I did this thing, I did that thing, and the idea there is the stick is like the cedar, and you're going to let it go. So everyone speaks out loud. Everyone stands up, and they clear. Everyone does this clearing on themselves together, and then they put that stick on the fire. And that's an element that we've brought into some ceremonies, sometimes as well. Yeah, and so like there's so many different designs with the Red Road as well, and there's different levels of, I guess, levels of strictness with ceremonies. Like some, you're not allowed to leave the teepee for the whole night. You stay kneeling all night. You're not allowed to drink any water except for the times that water comes around in certain special parts of the ceremonies, and that type of thing. Yeah, if you come into like a community in Australia with that level of stricture, and this has happened where people come over and people are like, I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to kneel up. I want to drink water. I want to go outside. And people are like, I'm going to go. I'm going to get my car. I'm going to leave, and no one's going to stop me from leaving. Where there's certain designs that might work in a Navajo reservation or something like the United States, where they have everyone knows that's how you show up at ceremony, and that's just the way it is, and there's not like there's no middle ground. But if you apply this, particularly in Australia, people there is like a stuff you, I'll do what I want element to culture here sometimes, and we're putting too much strict structure on a ceremony and on certain types of people can really backfire and can lead to even aggression and danger, and people getting in their car under the influence of certain medicines and wanting to drive off. So a big part of applying ceremonial etiquette is there's a non-violent element. It's like what is going to be appropriate for these types of people tonight, and what is going to be too much that could put someone into danger or make them feel alienated and polarized from the group. And so there's a huge level of intelligence that needs to play out there, where a practitioner needs to really understand and have their finger on the pulse of the demographic of the people that they're serving, and what those people, what's most appropriate for their growth. And again, this is also the way San Pedro works. It's going to give you an experience that's challenging, but it's a challenge that you can handle. And so it's really aligning with that. That's the spirit of the plant, free will and choice, non-violence, but also giving, creating the space for that healing and connection and prayer. And sharing knowledge as well. Like, and one of the things that I'm really dropping into now is I'm just sharing as much as I can. There's a bit like I'm just not gonna pass it on. Just because there's so many problems going on the planet, and in society. It's like there's some really, really complicated, full-on problems I don't know the solution to. So giving more and more people access to San Pedro is so important. Like the problem that we've got right now with young people and social media and things they're addicted to on their devices is like no one knows what to do. No one knows, because in the free will, like I talk to this dad, he's like, look, if my son could do whatever he wanted, he would be on what's that one with the videos and everything? It's just like lots of videos. Not Instagram, it's the
TikTok. YouTube
Yeah, he's
Shorts.
like my son would be on TikTok all day.
Mm.
If I wasn't here to take his phone, he would be on TikTok all day. And this is where these young brains don't have the healthy inhibition to not do it.
Mm.
You know, and we're in, you know, and so we're in a situation, you know, as adults and parents and as government, like they're like, wow, like we've given young people this access, and now we've realized it's really, really bad, and no one knows what to do.
Mm.
And that's where adding entropy into the problem solving population and putting, you know, having access to these plants is like, well, we've got some serious problems
Mm-hmm.
as a society. And because the society here, there's so much excess and entitlement, it's very easy just to like not read the news and just kick it and watch footy and, you know, eat prawns. But like there's some serious stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are just choosing apathy, like choosing willful ignorance. And so another thing these plants do is they can really shut down apathy. Like a lot of people who are addicted to marijuana, for example, or you know, antipsychotics can be very similar. It creates apathy, like stuff it doesn't matter, like not my problem.
Mm.
Whereas you know, someone will have San Pedro, and it's like this, like yo, there's also this willpower. You are consuming willpower. You can make a difference. You can help people around you. You can help your family. You can help your neighbors. Like that guy, he started microdosing. He started picking up hitchhikers. He's just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to start helping people. And so there's this whole other element of like this forcer. There's this willpower of like, yeah, like I'm alive. I'm young. I'm vital. I'm going to like make a difference, as opposed to like, you know, smoking a bomb or popping a lithium and being like, yeah, ugh, you know. And so that the apathy element in our society is also quite convenient if you're if for the government, if you are a consumer who's just kind of going on and doing the thing. Yeah.
With the degradation of our soils and our food and the general world that we live in, so many of us are not meeting our daily nutritional needs, which can lead to all kinds of health issues, such as brain fog, impaired cognitive function, poor immune systems, thyroid issues, hormone dysregulation, fatigue, vitamin and mineral deficiencies such as low iron, low B12, low folate, low selenium, on and on it goes. And one solution to this is to incorporate organ meats into your diet, which are recognized as one of nature's most nutrient-dense foods. But you may not like the taste, or maybe you don't have access to quality organic produce. And this is where Cell Squared has you covered. They are a Melbourne-based company, and I know the founder, Wade Smits, personally, and they provide certified organic, 100% grass-fed and finished freeze-dried beef organ supplements. No prep, no mess, just pure nutrition. They are literally award-winning. They're backed by rigorous nutrient testing and quality assurance. They're consciously created, Australian-owned, sourced and made. They're free from glyphosate, GMOs, antibiotics, hormones, fillers, additives. Seriously, you can't get much better than that. So you can head over to cellsquared.com.au or use the link in the show notes and use the code KAYUTA10 at checkout for 10% off every single time you order some of your beef organ supplementation. That's KAYUTA10, all in capital letters, at checkout. Yeah, I want to return back to some of the ceremonial elements in a moment, but what I'm thinking about right now is that it's not uncommon to hear these anthropomorphized descriptions of teacher plants and sacred medicines. And yeah, sure, it certainly seems like various teacher plants have unique characteristics and certain ways of teaching. And I'd love to hear your take on the relationship between the various personalities and characteristics of certain plants versus the archetypal qualities that they can activate more within our psyche, our body.
Are you talking about certain plant medicines or just San Pedro?
I'm talking about both, yeah, because obviously, or perhaps not so obviously, various plants are going to have their own unique characteristics. But I mean, yeah, we could dial it in for the sake of this conversation and speak more specifically to San Pedro or Huachuma.
Well, there's a good one that I should mention, actually, that's become more apparent to me the last few years. Whereas, you know, as males, a lot of males, or masculine orientated people, want to connect with the feminine. They want to connect with women or feminine women, people who orientate with the feminine aspect.
Mm.
And so the yang wants the yin. Yeah. And so marijuana and ayahuasca are talked about. Oh, and hops. are all talked about to be these feminine spirits. Yeah. And in particular, marijuana and hops, a lot of men are getting their feminine needs met by drinking beer and smoking weed. And so where they don't feel like they want to hang out with their girlfriend or their wife, or they don't want a girlfriend or a wife, and they're getting their needs with the feminine met by these feminine spirits. And so there's these different personalities going on. And so sometimes, then these guys, they'll drink ayahuasca, which again is arguably a feminine spirit. And those three different feminine spirits don't want to share the guy. They don't want to share, and so you get these almost like these arguments going on for domination, that kind of thing. That's where you get these really interesting personalities going on. Whereas a lot of people talk about San Pedro being like a grandfather type person. Some people talk about this with peyote too. Whereas sometimes you can even talk about the mushrooms are more of like a forest being, a forest deity who's like, come and sit in the tree with me. When I sit in the tree, and we're gonna like check out the forest and like check out these cicadas, and we're gonna do this kind of thing. But the grandfather elements, as far as personality goes, is really quite powerful. If some people are familiar with Ram Dass. He's got this famous quote like, "Death is actually really safe." And so sometimes I think about San Pedro as like this kind of Ram Dass type kind of archetype, where someone's like, they've had too much, so they've had a really big dose and they think they're going to die. And so there's a lot of studies now, like a large dose of psychedelics and a near-death experience can be really similar psychologically. And I've had, maybe I've OD'd and I think I'm dying. And the spirit of San Pedro is like, well, death's actually really safe. So, and then he's like, look, okay, so if you're going to die, do you want to panic for half an hour and then die? Or, because if you're going to die, like you're going to panic and die?
How do you want to go about it?
Would you want to like just relax and just surrender to the process and then die? And then he would be like, both are fine. Both are going to have the same result. But just letting you know, free will here, but you have a choice if you want to panic and die or relax and die. Just a reminder. Cool. All right, I'll get back to you later. And so, and then you have this process. And so, I've been through that process. I've taken other people through that process. Some people, sometimes they'll have a death process with San Pedro on a macro dose. And so there's this element here of this kind of grandfatherly, like, hey, it's all good. And this also happens with, people might be looking at, some people might be in some bad habits. Maybe they're treating their partner badly. Maybe they're treating their family badly. Maybe they're just, not doing the recycling or something. Maybe they're doing something really bad. Maybe they're stealing money from people at work. And they have San Pedro and the personality there. He actually is like, hey, there's this thing, and there's too much apathy around it. So I'm gonna dial up the discomfort. I'm gonna dial up the self-loathing and shame, anxiety around the stuff you're doing, so you really notice it. And so there's almost like an accountability coach aspect here, like this grandfatherly like coach. And that's really powerful because it's quite complex as a facilitator when you've got someone like, hey, it was just suffering and guilt all night. You're like, oh shit. And it's like, it's actually a thing where some people, grandfather's going to dial up their discomfort so they become aware of the shit fuckery that they're doing all the time. One story, there's one guy, his whole ceremony, he just felt horrible. And he's like, oh, San Pedro makes me feel horrible. It's like this whole no accountability and blame the plant. And he got to the end of the ceremony and he realized that his diet is bad, his bad diet. And he's trying to like point the finger at other things, but he's like, okay, what I eat's bad. And San Pedro's dialed up that discomfort in my gut so that I know that. And this is really actually quite common with people with their first experience. Now, the different personalities of different types of San Pedro, I mean, you could spend your whole life studying the different types, literally your whole life, because there's hundreds of varieties of San Pedro, and work out what different ones do. And it's not like, if I give you a cutting and you grow at your place, it's going to start becoming different to the parent cutting at my place. And if we brew medicine out of both of them, they're going to be different. And that's because, like in winemaking, they talk about the terroir. which is like all the environmental factors of what's going on with iridas and soil, but also the energies around it. And also, if you start peeing on your cactus and I'm peeing on my cactus, it's also aligning to two different people where the medicine is actually growing in a way which is what you need for you and what I need for me. So like, I've ingested some plants that have been growing in a garden surrounded by crystals and peyote and San Pedro is growing in this garden. And that variety shouldn't have been strong, but it was maybe 5 or 6 times stronger than it should have been. And the only reason I can really quantify that is because the environment it's growing in. So if you get into mechanistic chemistry, my friend who does a lot of San Pedro brewing, he says it's 20% science, 80% magic. We don't know with a lot of this stuff how it can get so different. Because you could take it cutting and put it up on a mountain in the Vic Alps somewhere like that, and you could produce something really, really special, and it could be just because of where it is. But in general, a short spine San Pedro, something like a Pachinoi, in general, they are not as strong and are more grounding. They orientate our perception downwards and to the earth and feeling. So if you're walking up a mountain, it's feeling that's ecological awareness, so this non-separation with country, with the wind, with waters, with plants and animals, with fire, this grounding element. So if you have a brew and you put some short spine in, it's going to add a grounding element to the brew. So like quite a narrow Bridgicii, sometimes people call them something more like a Nimbin bridge or something like that. This is quite a narrow cactus with long spines. They are, one way you could describe it, it's quite slang, but not so trippy. They're not like you're getting all these downloads or teachings and connection and everything like that. And they're more this body sort of feeling. This more like, well, my body feels amazing. I'm so glad I have a body, and all my toes feel amazing, and like, everything. This beautiful feeling in my body.
Or the
And so,
inverse of that too. Hey, damn, I'm getting a
yeah,
really, really heavy clean out of my body.
yeah, yeah. And so then you start getting into these other different varieties, things like Peruvianus or some of the longer spine British where you're getting something that can be really can bring in more this ecstatic kind of happiness, but also this deeper element of expansion and knowledge. At the same time, in high dosage, any variety is going to be pretty um, multidimensional. Um, and whether you consume it at daytime or nighttime is completely different, because the daytime is this kind of with your eyes open, is like everything around me and the environment, and me in the room, me and the fire, me and the other people, and it's this connected to these things outside yourself, and it's this relationship. Whereas if you know work at nighttime if you dial down what I call sympathetic cues, these things that activate the sympathetic nervous system, things like light and sound and stuff like that, your experience goes inward into the like internal hyperspace and into other times and other places, experiencing other things where, because the body feels safe and you're feeling uninterrupted by the facilitation if there's anyone else there, you're able to go and be in a stable astral place while you're not in your body, because the body feels safe enough to do that. And so your somatic intelligence is able to see, oh, there's a nice fire. I'm not going to get hypothermia. Nice carpet. Maybe I'm lying on a sheepy. I feel the facilitators here, the experience, they know what they're doing. And so I'm able to look, close my eyes and be here, and the music's not going to suddenly jar me or shock me or wake me up. The music's not going to try to create catharsis in me. It's just, so the concept of ambient music is something that doesn't strike the nervous system, where we have to come back down the astral cord and see if the body's okay. And so there's that element there too, of the light and the dark. And so again, we're talking about a very dynamic medicine. There's so many different uses, and that's one of the most beautiful and fantastic things about it. And it's so safe and intelligent. It it can really help people as well, because like if people start experimenting with it and have it in an environment, it's not so coherent, like at a party or a dodgy doof. The medicine's gonna be like, hey, like, this isn't ideal. We're gonna make the most of this, but this isn't really ideal. But we're not gonna, like, if you have, say, a whole bunch of mushrooms in a bad environment, it can really turn into a bad trip. and be very, very difficult. San Pedro's often able to keep you on the bike and be like, okay, cool, we're going to make the most of being at this doof and dancing, or make the most of being at this party, and we're going to keep everything safe. And so that's one of the most beautiful things about it, is that it keeps people safe, and it keeps them protected, even if they have it in an environment that's just dumb.
Yeah, there's certainly so many variables in what we're talking about here, and then it feels like we're coming back full circle again into, there are rarely any guarantees when it comes to working with any medicine, whether it's traditional, alternative, natural, sacred, Western, and that's part of the thing of when you're steeping in the great mystery, of which this is certainly a part. And you just mentioned music before, and I'm being mindful of the time too, Bay. Where are you at? Have you got to duck off soon? Because there's three other things I'd love to chat to you about. You're good. Okay, so you mentioned the music, and to circle back around, you touched on some of the elements of the Red Road peyote ways that you incorporate into your ceremonial work. Now, you're on the road a reasonable amount of time as a full-time working member of the Australian plant medicine scene. So you've obviously got some kind of adaptability there. Of course, within your practice and the different locations and working with different people, and you touched upon a great point there about this discernment that's required for facilitators, the psychological, the energetic, the spiritual discernment, to open ourselves up to the wider container of all these different individuals coming in and all their intent and their unique characteristics and the dynamics that form to create this collective container. So there's that kind of discernment piece. But then I'm also curious about, within all of this adaptability of your ceremonial approaches, are there more specific or primary ceremonial frameworks that you find yourself returning to when it comes to working with Huachuma?
Are you talking about music still?
That's a part of it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Look, yeah, I mean, the basic framework to return to is less is more, but also, safety. And so, and just their presence. So, if someone's say for one-on-one, and you've had a lot, you don't really need music. It's almost going to distract you from your process. Maybe something super ambient and light, but also when someone's very deep, it's like when you're putting a toddler to sleep, and they're on the bed, and you just maybe rolled them off. They're having cuddle, and you've rolled them down, or maybe like a 1-year-old, this kind of thing. You've rolled them off you, and they kind of you move away, and okay, they're asleep, and then they're like, oh, they start to cry a little bit, and you can even just put your hand on them, put your finger on, even just I've experimented. You put your finger on them, and they can feel your presence. They're like, oh, okay, cool. They're not quite awake yet, but their nervous system is like, are you around?
Mm-hmm.
Because on a primal level, they're a nice little meal for a predator, and so they want to know that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, you're there, cool. I'll go back to sleep. Now, if you're in a really deep state, you're like that baby. You want to know on the same sort of subconscious level, are they there? Are they there?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you can kind of open the corner of your eye, or just hear me or see me, then your body's like, cool, because I'm deep right now, and I need this person to be keeping an eye on my physical body while I'm this deep. And for someone with, say, no trauma, they could probably do it by themselves. But a lot of people, they just need that level of safety, that kind of thing. And so presence is really important as far as ceremony structure goes. If I'm working with a team, all my team members know if they're going to go to the bathroom or go do anything, they come straight back. So having the again with clients as well, if they're going to go out, we want people to come straight back. So having that everyone's presence, but particularly all the people who are facilitating a holding space, is really important. And non-invasive presence as well. We're just there. So the non-invasive element is really important, and that's like not being in people's face too much, not checking in on people. Hey, you're good. You need anything? Da, 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 da. Like again with San Pedro, like asking people questions. A lot of people are like, they don't understand so well what you're saying. And so trying to digest the question, and trying to think of an answer that's going to gratify the person asking the question as well. So a lot of these sorts of social things fall apart. So again, not talking, we don't talk. And we really make sure that people don't talk to each other, because a lot of people's anxious sort of social cues can come online, and they want to chat. And it's really, it's not good, because a lot of people can't get across what they want to say, and a lot of people can't hear properly. And that is quite unique to San Pedro in particular. Whereas, say, with ayahuasca and peyote or mushrooms, sometimes it's a lot easier to communicate, or LSD, let's say. The other sort of ceremonial things that, it's, music is really powerful for guiding, guiding the ship really, and having a dynamic, intelligent repertoire of music that can spontaneously be played if the right moment approaches. For example, I do a sound journey of different international music, usually, after midnight in my nighttime ceremonies.
Mhm.
There's a gentleman there. His teenage daughter died suddenly, of an illness 3 months prior, and he's there. And I have a song on that is sad. It's a sad song. It's like an orchestra song, and he just bursts into tears, and it's like it's loud. He's howling like it's a lot of grief, and it's contagious. So the people around him start crying. There's a lot of people crying. So I can look at my playlist. The next song is not sad. Yeah, it's like it's not gonna keep that frequency. So I need to change that. I need to change that now,
Mm.
and to realize that playing something that isn't in that frequency before the natural there's a catharsis cycle in the body. How long the body wants to cry. It's a natural somatic process. And so I need to put on some more music that's sad. And we're gonna stay with this energy as a group, because the total whole, everyone's very aware of his situation. And everyone's holding that presence and that feeling and like sharing that grief.
Mhm.
And so we're gonna sustain grief for maybe 2 more songs. And then I need to choose some music that's gonna lift us out of grief, but not too much polarity. Not like a happy song or anything like that.
Mm.
And slowly lift something more somber and reverent, let's say, and using the music to shift the total energy in the whole room into something else.
Mhm.
And so, with, say, a sound journey, there's a whole artistry to the progression of the medicine in someone's body, but also understanding the warrior's journey archetype of a cathartic process
Mhm.
of introduction to music, introduction to maybe something that's challenging, and the like passing through that, and the liberation, completion, and then maybe even celebration, this
Mm.
aspect. And also through, with playing live music. It's like music that's often the beginning of the ceremony. We want to play really gentle music and slowly introduce guitar, introduce voice. And there'd be a moment, it's like, oh, the energy in the room is really strong. Or in the teepee, we're going to play some music that's really communal and celebratory. Like, oh, it's amazing to be alive. This sort of music that's really the spirit of gratitude, which is its strong element of consuming San Pedro, is feeling gratitude. And there is also music that it has this catharsis, or, well, like the drumming or things like this, things that maybe don't sound nice, but there's a cathartic process in the body, and that's where you get more people's bodies can shake and vibrate, and you get more of this sort of cleansing happening with the body.
Mm.
And this is, in some types of ceremonies, cathartic music can lead to a lot, and this is more common with the ayahuasca and peyote. Cathartic, when someone does a cathartic set of songs, people throw up.
Mhm.
They might do 4 cathartic songs in a peyote ceremony or an ayahuasca ceremony.
Mm.
These sorts of ikaros, and singing to cleansing, singing to cleaning, singing to the plants, and singing to these plants in someone's body to help this person. With the way we serve San Pedro, we don't have as much vomiting and this sort of thing, so it's not as common.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, it's really important to be aware of this dynamic nature, and how having strong leadership around where the music's at. And also, if other people are playing music, being aware of their egos, and any, especially this is just common with younger people, which is with ego development. But some people, they, good musicians come to a ceremony, but they want to play for attention and being seen,
Mhm.
as opposed to um playing music to support the group. And so there's a whole element of playing music selflessly, and there's this non-dual element. It's not about me, it's about what the group needs. And if you've got 50 people, you need to look at the average of what the group needs and try and steer that ship, because you could have someone over here who's giggling or having an orgasm, and someone over here who's crying,
Mhm.
and you'd be like, well, Like I've got to do something which is like an average of the whole group, and so it's there's a whole thing there. And so working with other musicians as well as a facilitator, you've got to also be aware of the reasons why someone's like, oh, I really want to play. You've got to be aware of the reasons why they want to play, and if that reason is actually earnest. And what's beautiful about this plant is the plant's also going to train the singers about what's appropriate. And so, I've got team members I've been working with for several years, and it's like, I'm like, can you play music for half an hour and just whatever you feel, but with less experienced people, can you play like 4 songs that are really, really gentle, are going to stay with this energy? Or, hey, can you play 4 songs that are going to bring the energy up, that kind of thing. And so having, when you're working in a team and things like that, working with people who are very experienced with the plants is just it's just magic. I just did a tour with someone in New Zealand. He just loves San Pedro. And he's a good musician. He just loves San Pedro. And it's like he's just so aware and connected to how the spirit of this plant works with people. So just magic working with people who are on that level. But what's really hard for a lot of facilitators is there's not a lot of amazing musicians around. We need more. We need more people who are learning music in this way. So it's got a cramp.
No,
are
you're
learning
good.
music and coming to ceremonies and this kind of thing. Because it's serious work, man. It's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful gig out there. Playing at ceremonies. Yeah. It's just the magic that's created as well when we're all playing the same songs, and it's just profound. Like the beauty of sometimes these ceremonies, and like a lot of people singing together is such a healthy thing that people need. And there's been studies that like people join churches not because they want to pray to Jesus, but because they want to sing with other people. So they go to church and sing it. Because singing together is so healthy. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And in these spaces with these frequencies of love and gratitude and sharing, it's gorgeous.
So it sounds like you've been talking about a little bit of a convergence here between the way that you use music coming through speakers, but then also instrumentation, like live instrumentation too. And then you mentioned working with the fire several times and starting your music at around midnight at nighttime.
That's recorded music
Yeah,
around midnight.
okay. So, yeah, then I'm curious about if there's a typical progression of how things usually unfold for you within a ceremonial context in terms of live instrumentation first and then the music coming through the speakers afterwards. But then also curious to know how and if working with the medicine in groups is common throughout the day as well, or do you stick to the nighttime dynamic?
Yeah. And so again, coming back to this thing of metabolism. So if you have a group of people, they ingest a big cup of San Pedro. Some people are going to feel it in 20 minutes. Some people, it's going to take 3 hours to fully activate. The catharsis cycle with San Pedro is generally, if you're going to get vomiting or even diarrhea or anything like that, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in the first 4 or 5 hours. Now, once we're 3 hours in, the way we do it is if anyone wants it to be stronger, we can give them some more. So the first half of the ceremony is where catharsis is going to take place. And this is pretty much completed within 6 hours. And so that means if you have more, let's say if you started at 6, if you have more at midnight, it's not going to be cathartic. It's going to take you deeper. It's going to take you into greater stillness in your body. One of the names for San Pedro is Suna, which in Quechua, Su is quiet, quiet mind medicine. And so if you have more, it's going to actually make things even more quiet and still. And so that first 6 hours, that catharsis cycle is done. Generally, the first, again, this applies at daytime. If you're doing daytime ceremony, it's the same thing. That first hour, we really like, it's nice to have some silence. It's nice to be with the sound of the rain or the insects or the nature, whatever's going on. And there's a whole inverse of all of this, because with people who are ceremonially aware and confident, you don't actually need any music. If the more medicine you have, the less music you need. So if the dosage is increased, you need the sound of the rain is fine. The sound of the forest is fine. You don't. Music's almost distracting, because music at a higher dose, music becomes a sympathetic cue, which keeps you in the body. And if you remove the music, then you're able to go out into the universe and into possibility.
Mm.
And so, yeah, another aspect of music that's really powerful is we've been working more and more Sanskrit and Tibetan mantras, and currently learning some Japanese mantras and Chinese mantras, particularly the Heart Sutra and things like that. So again, coming back to Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and work with mantras, each mantra has a morphogenetic field, which opens a portal through time and space to all of the other people who practice that mantra. And in particular, ascended masters, monks, nuns, priests, lamas, who their spiritual attainments are also potentially shared when you open this portal through mantra. And so learning a mantra is really interesting, and singing it on medicine is really interesting because you go into these places of no mind where the mantra is singing out of your body. So to work with mantras, you need to learn it on that kind of level. So more and more working with Tibetan in particular, where I'd be doing guitar arrangements to mantras and singing these, we're at the peak of the strength of the medicine. So let's say in a ceremony, maybe like 11 p.m., where and people are having these profound experiences of connection and wisdom. And after interviewing many, many participants, it's during these mantras where there seems to be a portal to the divine opening. And what's curious about this is some common mantra. There's millions of people practice them all over the planet every day, and they have in the past and they will in the future. And so the morphogenetic field is all of the people who are working with that mantra. And so there's also it opens this community of beings that are available, and people experience this communion and this love because it's through the heart. And I can't say enough about it. It's a very complicated and beautiful subject where there's a few chapters about it in my upcoming book, the Therapy and Philosophy of San Pedro. And it's absolutely something to feel. It's like another way of describing it could be like religious ecstasy, where someone is singing like this, and the ecstasy that people feel is all of this connection with this love for creation, love for the divine. Really, really powerful. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, man.
Interesting conversation to have when we're talking about some of the more neo-shamanic or the modern approaches that are a lot more, let's say, liberal or free from a lot of the traditional ways of practice. And then also the ways that have been practiced, like you're talking about the mantras and the chanting and all this kind of stuff, the ways of praying, the ways of conducting ritual and holding a ceremonial container, and have they been practiced for thousands of years, and they've been ingrained into the morphogenetic fields, and then we practice in that same way, we're able to tap into that same kind of energy and all that it represents and contains, rather than these more, the word I used was neo-shamanic or modern approaches. So I'm wondering what you've got to say about that.
I've got some homies who are like, some people call them song catchers,
Yeah.
and where it's like songs come to them, and they write amazing songs, and they have a beautiful effect on people, and it's a beautiful thing, and and they're playing ceremonies, this kind of thing, and it's got a certain level of power and depth to it. But if you're practicing the Heart Sutra in Mandarin perfectly, and you're delivering it in a coherent space. So towards the peak of the San Pedro experience, I talk about this thing where people are in a heightened, coherent listening state. That means when you're listening to something, you are really listening. It's not just like playing a mantra on the radio while you're cooking eggs in the morning. You are fully listening on a physical, spiritual, mental level, and receiving and feeling this. And so goosebumps now saying this. And so these mantras, because there's so much power linked to them, millions of people practicing them in the past, in the future, and now, there is such a power behind it when it comes to transformation, inspiration, and knowledge coming through, and linking to the kind of attainments and wisdom of others, especially maybe people who are deceased, who've devoted their lives to these ways, and these ways, these levels of being. Yeah, so it's the whole neo element's really interesting, because like I'm a British person born in south of Polynesia, who's serving San Pedro and peyote to people, and I'm singing Tibetan mantras. It's like there's a pretty neo element there to it all, really. Yeah, and so I do a lot of experimentation with what music works, what music doesn't work. So like I did a sound journey once, and I put the Doors on somewhere in the sound journey, and it really, because I've listened to the Doors, I'm like, yeah, it's got this kind of like 70s psychedelic vibe. Great, cool. I'll put a track on. And then in the heightened listening state, it opened this portal of how much like drugs and alcohol and addiction and density that band was involved in at the time that say that was recorded. And I was like, well, this is like a really negative portal to open in a ceremony. Okay, I won't play the Doors again. And so this heightened listening state can be really far out. So, if you look at Michael Pollan's book, he does a mushroom journey with a facilitator, and she's playing electronic music, and his visions are basically be inside the synthetic city, or let's say be inside a computer, like be inside a circuit board in a synthetic environment, because she's playing synthetic music. And this heightened listening state can take you back through the portal to the creation of this music. And in that situation, it's synthetic. And he eventually gets to the point, he's like, can you change the music? And she puts on a cello piece by, I think, Yo-Yo Ma. And he is so enraptured by this music. And cello is amazing because you can channel your passion and love for the piece of music and the instrument and for the moment through a cello and broadcast that and record it. And someone can listen to that and feel your love and passion. But if you record the cello and you're like, oh, fuck it, I'm pretty sick of playing cello, here's this piece of music, that's also what they're going to feel. So this heightened listening state takes you through the portal to the creation point of the music to see if the delivery of the recording of the music was authentic and earnest, or if it's recorded by a bunch of people who argue with each other in a recording studio. You can actually feel that. And so you'll find music that works and doesn't work, but particularly music that's been recorded to tape. So if you put on, or if you're lucky enough to have vinyl, so if you have a lot of San Pedro and you listen to Enya on vinyl, and that's been recorded in the 80s to a tape machine, that means you have an infinite amount of, on a fractal crystal level, you have an infinite amount of data that's coming through the speakers, not anything that's digital or compressed or lessened in any way. And so, but in general, if you listen to, music that's been recorded through a tape machine as opposed to digitally, even if you're playing it through Spotify, it's still taking you through this portal, and it's very, very powerful and very, very noticeable and very easy to put your finger on and define if you're playing very modern digital music or something that's been recorded in the 70s or 80s.
Yeah, once again, we're talking about how amazing it is for Huachuma to have that capacity to open us up into greater levels of energetic sensitivity and deeper alignment to one's intent. And throughout this conversation, a lot of what we've been talking about has been this greater alignment, this straightening, this clearing, this cleaning. But of course, the inverse is possible too, and that's what you invited me to look into right before we had this conversation, which is the other side of the spectrum, the misuse by seekers or facilitators with all of the power dynamics and the inflated ego or the spiritual ego, manipulation, sexual deviancy, the lack of integrity, the poor boundaries, the idolization, all these types of things. So,
Yeah.
is there anything you want to riff on here?
If you're doing some stuff that is not appropriate and you're ingesting plant medicines, it's going to tell you. It's going to be like, hey, stop doing that thing. Like this is not good. If you're like cheating on your husband, cheating on your wife, or you're a lot of people get into this kind of fierce competition with other facilitators. Maybe you're like trying to bring other people's events down, or this person doesn't know what they're doing, or this or that, and you get this kind of competitive element going on, which is really inappropriate. The plants will tell you. They're going to be like, hey, you're doing this thing. That's good. They're going to show it to you. And ayahuasca's probably the strongest at being like creating quite a confronting, like door slamming in your face as far as accountability goes. And San Pedro and peyote can be less. But we have free will. So, let's say you're into stealing car stereos, and you just in life in general, and you're ingesting these plants, and they're like, hey, stop stealing people's stuff. Like, it's not on. You can choose to keep doing it. You have free will. the plant's going to give you these hot tips, like hot tip, theft isn't good. And you can be like, no, I'm going to keep doing theft. There's a good story about this guy who stole a statue on a drunken bender in London. And then years later, he cooked some San Pedro at home for the first time and he drank it. And he's sitting out in his yard and he's sitting next to this big concrete statue. And he's looking at it and he's like, wow, I stole that on a drunken bender. That's really wrong. I've never even stopped to think that that was wrong. I just thought it was funny. And he's like, that could be really important to those people. Like it could be like a family heirloom. It could be, marriage gift. I don't know. Who knows? Stolen business. I stole it. So he picks the statue up and he goes and finds this house. It's late at night. And he finds this house. He finds a garden. He even finds a spot in the concrete. This is years later where the statue was. And he puts it back. And he's like, done. All right. And that San Pedro's like, you need to like make amends. You need to work this out. Yeah. So because of free will, people can do all kinds of nasty shit to each other. And the medicines, if you ignore the advice the medicine gives you, you can just keep doing this stuff. And so there's all kinds of malpractice. Like in the MDMA industry, there's a lot of people who are hooking up with their clients. And you can do a course on how to serve MDMA and how to like help people with PTSD and stuff like that. That course doesn't guarantee you're going to be a good person. You can't teach someone to be a good person. It's a choice. And so the FDA in the United States denied basically legalizing MDMA as a medicine for PTSD because they did all this research and like too many of the facilitators are getting mixed up and like, hooking up with their clients. And there's like a lot of malpractice going on because MDMA it's a really tricky one to work with because the kind of love and connection element that can happen can really, if people don't have a good moral compass or strong boundaries, then everything can really fall apart and it can create more trauma, more problems. And so that's a really complicated one. With humans, if you study chimpanzees and bonobos, in a pack mentality, in a hierarchical pack mentality, if you are the leader, you are, say you're macaque's a good example. You get them in Bali. You have the bull macaque. He's like the big male that usually cruises around at the back of a group of macaques and whatever that group of them's called, and he's in charge. And if you same with chimpanzees and bonobos, you have there's a hierarchy, and if you're at the top, if you study the blood or saliva of a primate at the top of the hierarchy, they have less stress. Being at the top, they're the most relaxed. Now, if you know about our bodies, stress hormones make us die younger. Almost all disease comes from stress hormones. And so we all want to be less stressed. Now a lot of women biologically are attracted to the bull macaque, the dude at the top of the hierarchy. And it's biological. He's gotten less stress. She's going to have less stress. He's got all this abundance and control. And on a biological level, that means you're going to have less stress during pregnancy and your baby's going to be healthier. Because if you're stressed during pregnancy, all these things that are going wrong with the way the baby's growing and the brain's not developed as well, the body's not developed as well. So on a biological level, women are attracted to these powerful male leaders. And so a lot of men in our culture are motivated to be powerful to get access to women. And so then they might not be motivated to be the head of a business, but if I'm the head of the business, then women are going to be attracted to me because I'm the director of the business. And that's what I want. I want access to women. And again, we have this thing with media and pornography and everything like that, where a lot of people are growing up, all the social media, that all these different access to different types of sexuality, all these different women, all these different men, all these different types of people. And there's this whole self-entitlement in our culture where we feel entitled to having all these different sexual experiences. And so the brain is programmed to want to consume sexuality. And the best way to get that is to be in power and be in leadership. And so when you have that dynamic happening with people who are in power and leadership in the plant medicine industry, it can get really, really nasty because they're not motivated by this non-duality of helping other people. They're actually on a sociopathic service to self trip, which is actually causing more harm to people. And so the plants, again, are going to keep schooling like around this whole area of nonviolence. It's like, let's say you have, there's a book called Way of the Superior Man by David Data. And he talks about these certain situations. And he's like, you've got your wife, you've got your kids, and there's this, you're going out with your wife, and there's like, you've got the 17-year-old babysitter who you can tell is attracted to you, and you're attracted to her. And he's like, well, if you sleep with the babysitter, you're going to ruin her life. You're going to ruin your wife's life. You're going to ruin your kid's life. You're going to ruin your own life. And so you don't do it, and it's like there's going to be situations where you're in leadership, like he's the leader of that family, and there's this young woman who's like attracted to him, and it's like, I'm not going to do that because it's a wrong thing to do. It's going to create so much harm, it's going to ruin people's lives. And so inside this sort of dynamic in male leadership, you're going to have these people who are attracted to you because of this power dynamic, and because of human engineering, and to have love and understanding about this sort of dynamic, and not, and so if you have a young person who's attracted to you, the way of offering love back to them is having a strong boundary. So the loving boundary, is because they actually don't need you to connect with them sexually. That's what they think they might want on a biological level of whatever their impulses are. And so many people, especially young women, really need strong moral boundaries from the men of leadership in our culture. But due to lack of initiation, and due to so much toxicity with the way the brain is programmed by media and excess and self-entitlement and self-gratification, we have a lot of people who don't have the healthy inhibition to, and that they're doing the wrong thing. And so you get all this kind of this kind of Me Too movement, Me Too energy within these industries, within the music industry, within plant medicine industry, with the yoga industry, all sort of thing. And I don't know the solution to it. Like it's so much of it comes down to this hyper self-entitlement and hyper self-gratification inside a culture where there's so much excess. There's so much excess in Australia. Drive around in wealthy parts of Melbourne when it's curbside collection. People are throwing out television couches, like, oh, that's my old jet ski. I don't want that one. It's the wrong color. I'll put it on the curb, so I'm gonna pick it up. And it's like there's a culture of excess, and this self-entitlement. I'll get what I want. I'll get what I want. My and sometimes what's that? Hyper self-gratification. My needs are more important than anyone else's. And again, that veil of separation, it's like self and other. And so dehumanizing that someone else as a sexual object. And so it's not me, it's them. I don't mind if it harms them because it's not me. And so there's a very dual way of living where um people are comfortable harming others. Yeah. And our society teaches young people to be sociopathic and call it normal. Look at like sporting competition between states, competition between countries, competition between political parties, competition inside economics, sociopathic entrepreneurism. If your business goes down, my business goes up, and we're going to celebrate when your business goes down. We are encouraged to be sociopathic and celebrate the demise of the competitors, and it's particularly strong within sporting culture. And it can create a lot of sort of thing. But I don't want to completely diss sporting culture, like say in New Zealand, for example, we pretty much don't have racism because of rugby. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. The syncing of like British rugby culture with the Polynesian culture, and it becoming a proud national identity, has completely eradicated racism in New Zealand. Where a white person, a Pakeha in New Zealand, their culture is Polynesian, is Maori, and they are proud of it. And that's very unique, and it's pretty much because of rugby. So I don't want to completely say, hey, sport's bad, because I was walking through the train station in Melbourne one day. It was a dark winter morning. Everyone's wearing black. Everyone's depressed. Everyone's on their phone. And this British guy, skinhead, he's wearing like a British flag as a cape. He's running down. This is like 6:30 a.m. He's running down an escalator. It's like, and then there's this like African man with a briefcase and a business suit, and he's like, yeah. And they run towards each other and hug each other. These are very different looking people, and because their team, I think it was maybe England or something, won a soccer game the night before. And at 6:30 a.m. on a rainy day, this dude with
Right.
no shirt, wearing a flag as a cape, is hugging this African businessman in the train station at 6:30 in the morning. I was like, soccer, sweet. There's whatever brings people together, And so I don't want to diss sports like that.
Sure.
But I'm just saying that there's an element of encouraging if you look at something more like cage fighting or something like that, this sort of stuff where normalizing, celebrating the destruction of someone else's body, and a bunch of mates going to come together and watch the cage fight, there is something wrong there.
Yeah, these are big conversations to be having, and there's a lot of nuance in here for sure. And there's no doubt that there's no shortage of offerings and opportunities in the world we live in. This fast-paced, rapid-fire, instant gratification, give it to me now, socio-cultural matrix that we're all enmeshed in one way or another. And you're making the point. You're like, what do you do about it? And yeah, there's holistic, integrative, systemic change that needs to happen on so many levels. But like I said, that's a whole separate
Yeah.
conversation, a
I
whole
just want to
separate
come back to your
podcast
question
episode
about
right there.
speaking from the beginning.
Yeah,
So I knitted a whole bunch of things together just then,
yeah,
and getting into the sort of programming that people are exposed to that can create malpractice inside leadership. Everything I just knitted together is the way San Pedro helps me speak. I'm not on San Pedro right now. And it's joining the dots, understanding the cause and effect, and the process, and also the sociology, and what people are exposed to, what people are dealing with at the moment, and what people share before ceremony, after ceremony, everything like that. And so the way I am delivering this information is the way San Pedro has taught my brain to interact and commune with the sort of questions you're asking. So kind of coming back to that question from the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Huachuma is good like that. And when it comes to this theme that you've brought back in again of the voice, and this is something that I wanted to ask you about, you're pretty open about your work and your role as this full-time working member. Say that again.
Why do you think I'm pretty open about it?
Why do I think you're pretty open about it? Well, I feel that you're pretty open about it because it's absolutely needed. Like, I mean, hearing you speak to this in several podcasts, I know part of your intention is to demystify these traditions and these approaches to healing and to normalize these types of conversations. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but then I'm also very curious about any kind of considerations that you might have given to the legal landscape in regards to prohibition and attracting or deflecting any of that scrutiny that might come your way. Like, is there a way that you've considered of how you walk this edge of responsibility and communication and visibility? And are there lines that you won't cross when it comes to publicity? Because I mean, you're obviously super open to having these conversations because we're chatting right now. But at the same time, I haven't noticed that you're very heavy, at least on the social media front.
Yeah. On the social media front, it's not really the platform where I talk about any of this kind of stuff. It's more, I'm working more with the word of mouth element, and so my next phase is 2 books that I'm releasing. And if someone wants the information, they can go to these books, and then the social media stuff might happen down the track when it more comes to case studies and people's experiences. Yeah. And there's a few other reasons I can't go into on here. But the question I asked you about why do you think I'm so open about it is I truly believe in this work. I'm not like, oh, I'm pretty into it. I truly believe in the power of San Pedro to help people. It's unshakable knowing. And in my life, I haven't really met many other people who are experienced as I am with it. In this country and in this context, and also in working with this demographic. Of course, in other parts of the world, there's people that are just from long lineages, of course, who are way more experienced than me on every level. I'm still scraping the surface. But if I was to be challenged by someone, say an authority figure who was going to tell me that this is wrong and this is wrong,
Authority figure in quotation marks.
who was saying who was convinced that this was not good for people, the amount of evidence I could produce to prove them wrong is nuts. Yeah, it's like a lot. And the argument for these sorts of plants being restricted is a crime against humanity. The argument is basically religious, Puritan. We want to restrict your access to yourself, and we want to produce a population that isn't critically thinking. We want to reduce the potential of your health and wellness in your existence. We want to control you, and we're going to give you propaganda to make you believe us. There there isn't evidence to back up the laws, and the laws that are in place are 1970s Nixon administration drug policies from the United States to um, help manage people's attitude in relationship to um, being drafted into the Vietnam War. And these policies are just still sitting there now because of, I guess, lazy Christian policy within government. You know, but I believe so fervently in what I'm saying, and that's why I believe it. I'm not so that's why I speak like this. It's I'm not like on the fence like a bit. I'm not like, oh, a bit into this. This is my life. Yep.
Yeah, and we need more of that conviction within the plant medicine world.
Yeah. It takes time.
Getting
It takes
close to
time. It takes time to develop the sort of conviction because you've got to have the experiences which reinforce it.
Well, there's a lot that been said in this conversation, mate. I reckon we're getting pretty close to wrapping this one up. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you might like to say or discuss before we finished up, or what kind of invitations or encouragements
Yeah.
might you offer to the people looking to deepen into these pathways and these wisdom ways?
We'll just continue on the subject. I think that a lot of people are afraid to talk about these sorts of things. And there's this forbidden fruit element, which is a latent aspect of Christianity. Is like, oh, I eat the forbidden fruit, I'm going to be thrown out of the Garden of Eden by God forever. Now, if you look at, so a lot of us, maybe some of us who have Scandinavian bloodlines, if you are thrown out of the family, you're thrown out of the clan, you die. You cannot survive winter on your own if you have that kind of bloodline of living somewhere where there's a cold winter. So being cast out from the group means death. And now, so a lot of people have this fear of being outcast, and that the forbidden fruit, or the San Pedro, the peyote, the ayahuasca, the mushrooms is a forbidden fruit. And so there's an element of like, don't even talk about it because you might be cast out. And so there's even stuff like, you know, in the workplace, you don't want to mention that you've had this experience because what if the boss thinks, well, this guy's had LSD, maybe he's not safe to drive the bulldozer or something like that at the mine or something like, you know. So there's a lot of people that there's a lot of fear around what can I talk about. And so I really encourage people to liberate themselves from the fear, because there are so many people accessing plant medicines in a time where we really, really need them as a culture, and talking about it and creating these opportunities and creating these conversations, because a lot of people are yearning. You could have a room of people who are yearning for this conversation, but no one actually talks about it because they're all worried about what the other person will think. And this is slowly changing, but I encourage people more and more, if they had access to these ceremonies, if they have access to plants, or they have access to information, just to share about it and talk, especially people that are going through a hard time. I'll give you an example. So there's a gentleman, and his son has had his 4-year-old son's got bone cancer, and he's had to get surgery on his femur. And the surgery that he ends up getting it's the surgeons who are more like students, and they end up removing way more bone than is needed, and it's actually a lot of medical malpractice involved. And the father has made the decision about the surgery. You know, what's best for my 4-year-old son. And it turns out that maybe he's like, well, maybe I made the wrong decision here, and I've affected my son's life in this big way, and it's on me. It's on me as dad. And he's like in this really heavy world of shame and self-loathing. And someone talks to him. Someone mentions, you know, getting access to a ceremony, San Pedro ceremony. And he comes to the ceremony, and he goes through these emotions, and he comes to a place of peace and wholeness and self-forgiveness. Is like, I was doing the best I could with the tools I had at the time, and made the best decision I could at the time. And I need to stand by myself, and stand by my son, and stand by my family, and love myself no matter what. Whether I made whether I made the right decision or the wrong decision, I'm going to love myself no matter what, and I'm going to keep on being a good dad. And going through that warrior's journey process with the medicine, and just really like, I mean, this is why we do this work. We do this work to help people, and having people like that who are like, he was so scared of coming, like he almost didn't come. People like that was like, this. It's hard. It's hard, like facing the stuff like this. And he went home like a new man, like a proud man. Yeah, and because someone mentioned it to him. And so I really encourage more people to talk about this sort of thing, because these healing opportunities can suddenly appear for someone who really, really needs it. It can be a really, really big
Mm-hmm.
deal. And
Mm.
just someone could be in a really violent, toxic marriage, and they're just in a state of apathy or alcohol or smoking or pharmaceutical drugs that are making it they're tolerating it. They could be tolerating it for years. And they go to a ceremony, and the San
Mm.
Pedro says, well, you can go for another 10 years doing the same thing and suffering, or you can leave and get a divorce. And leaving in 10 years is going to be just as hard as tomorrow. And so, like, I'm just letting you know, like, making this change now is a really good idea. And so, some people are getting out of it. Could be a workplace, it could be an addiction or something like that, where there's the San Pedro helps them draw a line in the sand. It's like, enough is enough. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life doing this to myself, and I'm going to get out of the situation. And again, if someone's
Mm.
told them, someone's going, hey, maybe you should go to the ceremony, maybe we'll help you out. You know, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah, and like, we've been working with first responders, military, special forces, lawyers, doctors,
Mm.
nurses, um, fire brigade, traumatized people who need to go in there, need to be in a safe place to work through some complicated stuff. And so
Mm.
it's all types of people from all of society are attending plant medicine events to work on this stuff, and it's a beautiful, powerful, powerful industry. And this industry needs all the support it can get. And yeah, it's a
Mm.
complicated, complicated subject, because on a government, the government doesn't support it because they don't understand it. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I hear. And to the people listening, unshackle yourselves. Let's normalize these conversations. And for the people that want to come and tune in with you more, how can everyone stay connected with you, learn more about your work, stay updated on what you're offering, come and tune in with you in ceremony, in person? What's the deal?
Yeah, you could just send me an email. So bless the sun in our heart at gmail.com. Bless the sun in our heart at gmail.com. Just send us an email. I mean,
Yeah,
you can
bro.
look me on Facebook, Bay Tretyakov on Facebook. Like, just look me up at Bay Tretyakov on Instagram. You can like find me. Bay is a Chinese name, BEI. Tretyakov is my wife's surname. Yeah, yeah. But email's great. Just
I'll
an
put it
email.
all, yeah, I'll put it all in the show notes so everyone can access it super easy. Hey, and then you mentioned the book
Yeah.
that's coming down the pipeline. What else is on the horizon?
Oh, well, that's that first book, and then there's a novel after that. So the novel is about a young guy who actually ends up living in a San Pedro retreat and learning all about how to facilitate. And
Mm.
there's a teacher in the book, and the teacher is actually the whole book is actually a journey. He wakes up at the end. He's actually inside a San Pedro journey. So it's like a psychological thriller inside this kind of um modern day neo-shamanic kind of realm, where he's working with a teacher who's training him, but the teacher is actually the spirit of the plant. And
Mm.
it's written like a nice movie script. And so I don't really have much choice. I got to get these books out of me. The first one's half done,
Mhm.
so going back to China in a few months to keep writing. Just living
Mm.
in West China. It's beautiful up in the mountains. And yeah, the therapy and philosophy of San Pedro is just a really good handbook for a lot of the information that I'm just sharing is just more in a structured format. So understanding
Mm.
how to work with these plants in a good way and in a safe
Mm.
way, and understanding their potential and working with different types of people. But even just what we talked about with music, really breaking that down and really breaking
Mhm.
down the timeline that works with ceremonies, and also how to walk safe with San Pedro, how to
Mm.
plan day trips and all this kind of stuff. So it's essentially it's a health and safety manual for harm reduction and just passing all
Nice.
this knowledge on. So, when I was a teenager, we were just cooking it up and having as much as we could and going bush, with no instruction. And as far as harm reduction goes, we just had to work it out for ourselves. So a book like this is a great book that dad could give his son and go like, hey, you're gonna brew it, have a read of this book. So there's a few tips in here of how to keep you and your mate safe.
Mm.
Yeah,
Exciting stuff.
yeah, bro.
ETA? Hard to say.
I found a publisher, so hopefully the end of the year. The book's half written. And there's a book club as well. If anyone's interested in the book club, where I send out there's a sliding scale donation, and I send out the chapters that are already finished. And some of the chapters that are already finished are just wicked.
Have you got a link for that?
Um, I don't have. I'm developing this sort of website sort of link going on. I
Mm.
haven't quite. I've taken my old websites down.
Hmm.
But you could just email me and ask if
Yeah.
someone was interested. And also, you can check out my other work at humanTherapy.com, which is a touch-based healing system which I teach around the planet.
Cool.
attunementtherapy.com. Yeah.
Whew. Covered a lot of territory in this one, mate. Let's rein it in right here.
Yeah, right.
Big thanks, Bay, for offering up your space time to have this convo, and to the people tuning in. If you're listening or you're watching and you've received something valuable from this convo, drop in, let us know, hit Bay up, show him some love. And Bay, maybe finally, would love to invite you to share a little prayer as we finish up, whatever feels right and true for you in this moment. Yeah, that might be a nice way to tie a bow on this convo.
Yeah, I'm just praying that all these conflicts, man, like I'm just praying for all those young guys, all those young soldiers, all those men and women and Russians who are in Ukraine, if they can just go home, and just bring peace back to that part of the world. I was praying for all those young men and women, all those Israeli soldiers in the West Bank and Palestine, if they can just go home. Just praying for really good decisions and leadership. Just praying for this thing that's been going on now with India and Pakistan, that just can just like de-escalate and everyone can go back to where they need to be and just like live in peace. And just praying all these conflicts that are going on around the planet, that just praying for peace and friendship and partnership and beautiful relationships around the planet. So just really, really praying and focusing on peace on the planet right now. Aho.
Great spirit to all our relatives. Aho. Let's wrap it up right there. Thanks again, mate. All right, crew. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I didn't do too much talking in this one since Bay was on a roll. It certainly seemed like more of an interview rather than a conversation. But look, I'm in agreement with much of what Bay had to share regarding Huachuma's capacity as a master teacher plant that can change our lives in profound and also subtle, but no less profound ways. So if you're exploring these pathways for healing, growth, awakening, empowerment, transformation, deeper alignment to your mission, vision, purpose, potential, the greater destiny calling you forth, and you'd like some more guidance on how to approach and integrate these experiences in a holistic, integrative way, I created a program exactly centered around this. It's a 10-module, multifaceted, multi-layered guide with over 70 videos, which lays some of the foundational context for shamanic medicine journeys and the sacred medicine ways. We look at the mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, and environmental realms in regards to preparation and integration. Of course, how to explore these types of shamanic medicine experiences with appropriate tools, skills, and strategies, and then all of the ins and outs of integration, which is all about assimilating these experiences, learning from them, and transforming our lives through becoming the medicine and living it daily. You can check out the program at kayutakiora.com/visionary-medicines, or just use the link in the show notes. And if you're coming from this podcast, you can use the code KAYUTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Go and check it out. I think it's amazing. It's a great resource. I'm going to leave you with it. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode has been as fruitful as birdsong on morning wind. Until next time.